We're going to get to Eli Manning in just a minute with one of his former teammates, David Diehl, right here, who's much larger than me, as well as the latest from Panthers and Falcons training camp. It's SI Now on this Friday, August 4th. Robin Lundberg, of course, a two-time Super Bowl champion right here. But let's start with some of the headlines of the day. After Ryan Tannehill left practice yesterday, following a non-contact injury, the Dolphins reportedly feared their starting quarterback could need season-ending knee surgery and still do. He's going to be going for a second opinion. At the moment, they say Matt Moore is the starter right now. The question then becomes, what are they going to do at the quarterback spot, as this is a team, Dave, that people thought might take a step forward this year. Do you think this ends that?
You know what? That's the biggest thing that you saw, the development of Ryan Tannehill in this Adam Gase system. You know that Adam Gase is a quarterback guru. And when he took over and was the head coach of Miami Dolphins, I asked Peyton Manning, how do you think he's going to do? Peyton Manning looked at me and said, that was the best quarterback coach that I've ever had. Oh, wow. And he was younger than Peyton, just to show you what type of coach that he is. So if Colin Kaepernick was to go into this system, it would be something that he could fit in. You know that you're going to get rid of the ball quick. He's going to spread things out. He's going to give you half-field reads, check one, check two, dump the ball off or run the football and keep the yards and try to stay ahead of the chains. But it's just all the other distractions that I think that are going to keep Colin Kaepernick away from the Miami Dolphins.
If you were running the team, would you bring him in? Because the more openings that happen, the more guys who are the quote-unquote starter that go down when Kaepernick clearly has proven he's at least capable of starting for a team in the NFL, the more that gets talked about. Would you bring him in?
Well, the one question is number one, Matt Moore. He's prepared. He's been in this offense. He's a veteran. He's played a lot of football. So they have confidence in his ability to come in and fill in like he has in the past. The big question is all the stuff off of the field that keeps coming up with Colin Kaepernick. The minute that the Miami Dolphins were brought up, everybody in Miami were in outrage because he wore a Fidel Castro shirt last year when the 49ers were there. And then just yesterday, you have the reports of his girlfriend saying things social media-wise about the Baltimore Ravens owner and Ray Lewis. Those are the things that are really catching up to him, not the football stuff. You know, the people that he's hanging around with, the people that he's associating with, that keep taking it away from him playing football, which is his biggest asset and why he should be on a football team right now, because he is better than quarterbacks that are on certain rosters.
What about the other side of that, being that Kaepernick has done a lot of charitable stuff? Obviously, his initial transgression was not anything that was actually wrong, right? He was just trying to get a message out there. And the backlash, the inverse of the original backlash. Like the original backlash was, I hate this guy. And now there's a bit of a backlash from people who are saying, why doesn't he have a team? This feels wrong.
You know, and that's the biggest thing, is that he has done all those things. He's done the charitable things. He's come out and talk and saying that he's going to stand for the national anthem this year. But then what do the media and everybody keep bringing up? The negative stuff that he's not even doing most of it. So that's why that part of it, the good stuff that he's doing, keeps getting overshadowed by the negative things that keep happening around the people in his area.
Now let's go to the other possible options. We've actually heard Jay Cutler's name brought up. What do you think of that?
You know, obviously Jay Cutler, they were talking about him last season before he went into the booth now to call games with myself on Fox. But you know, the biggest thing for that is if he was to leave, he'd want financial security. He'd want to know that he was going to be guaranteed his salary and that he would be the starter for that entire season in order for him to break something that he could be very good at and do for the rest of his years, for the next 10 years or 20, based upon his preparation and how serious he takes this broadcast.
So your prediction, you're thinking it's going to be Matt Moore if it's not Ryan Tannehill?
I believe so. I think it'll be Matt Moore.
All right, we'll see what happens there. Something interesting in the lead-up to Mayweather-McGregor. There's been a lot of interesting things, but this actually took place in a ring. Paulie Malignaggi has decided to stop helping train McGregor after a picture from their sparring sessions he says was released out of context. Here's what the former boxer and current commentator said. I just wanted to clear the air. I am leaving the McGregor camp today. I came with the best intentions and intended to help out. It's some of the stuff outside the ring, and some ways some things were handled in training camp that I didn't agree with that made me come to this decision. It's not my place to dictate terms in a training camp that is not mine, but it is my place to decide if I want to be a part of it. Dave, your reaction?
You know, obviously you hear where he's coming from. He went there for the benefit of helping Colin McGregor. He was trying to help him, Conor McGregor, I said Colin, but Conor McGregor. He was there to help him. Obviously he has a vast amount of knowledge, not only from him as a boxer himself, but now commentating, watching everybody and being able to diagnose them just like a coach would. But having said that, You're going into the McGregor camp. You know stuff is going to get leaked. You know things are going to get turned for the positive of Conor McGregor. You know that there are going to be antics. And you're the sparring partner. So you know going into this that something's going to happen, that there's going to be things that you may not agree upon. But you said that you'd be a part of it. You committed to it. I think you should have stuck to it. Granted, you know the picture doesn't look well. It's making Conor look like he knocked out a boxer who's been a boxer his entire career. And that was the point of the picture. We all know that. But like I said, at the same token, when you're going there as a sparring partner, you know the spotlight is all about the star, and that's Conor McGregor.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I side with Malinology here because he was doing them a favor. I mean, this is a guy, people may not have heard of him before, like the casual who was parachuting in for this fight. So he's having his reputation besmirched a little bit in the process when he was a very reputable fighter. I mean, he was the guy that they mentioned as a possible opponent for Floyd Mayweather in the past. Obviously, he comments on the games now, and they're making him look like a wrestling jobber, right? The guy who just comes in to take the L.
But, I mean, you knew that risk going into this because of everything that's going on right now with McGregor and Mayweather. You knew there were going to be antics. You knew it wasn't going to be like a typical boxing fight and a match. So you knew that these things were going in. So you had to expect it. So for him to say, ignorance, it wasn't done, I don't agree, you knew you weren't going to agree with everything that they did in the camp.
Do you think they write in expect antics in the contract or something like that?
No, but I think anytime that you've seen anything that goes around him or Mayweather in any fight, any of the stuff leading up to it, it's there to draw attention, and it's there to make media headlines like that picture did.
No doubt. Steph Curry, he made his pro golf debut, made some headlines yesterday, shooting 4 over at the Web.com Tour's Ellie Mae Classic, making him our adrenaline performer presented by Toyota. Let's go places. Are we looking at the next two sports star here, David?
You know what? This guy is absolutely amazing. We were talking about it earlier. Is he Cyclops? Does he have focus? I mean, when he was able to throw the towel last year behind his back, no look, and knock down Draymond Green's cup out of his hand, that was a start.
It's more Jean Grey than Cyclops. With telekinesis, he can move objects with his mind.
But, I mean, for him to walk out there and play his first time to shoot 4 over par, I mean, there's people that would go and give any amount of effort at 20 lessons in order to do that. It just goes to show you what type of athlete that he is. But what's the biggest factor when it comes to golf? Is handling adversity, being able to stay calm, cool, and collected when you hit a shot in the bunker or in the other fairway. And this is a player that's been battle-tested, and he has that type of focus.
You know what gets lost in the Steph Curry conversation? A lot of people say, well, he's the everyman. I feel like I could be him. His dad played in the NBA. His brother plays in the NBA. His mom was a really good athlete. So there's a base there that Steph Curry is working from, even if he isn't built like a tank or something.
He's been groomed and has the genetics for this.
No doubt. Let's now get a report from training camp from a team that we know Steph Curry works roots for at least, and we'll welcome in now Jonathan Jones, our NFL reporter who has been at camp with the Carolina Panthers and Atlanta Falcons. We welcome in now Jonathan Jones, our NFL reporter who has been at camps in Carolina and Atlanta. Jonathan, Cam Newton experiencing some soreness in his surgically repaired shoulder. How concerning is this?
Well, it's concerning only because, we're still a month away from the start of the regular season. But it's concerning now because the Panthers are overhauling their offense. I wrote extensively about it for the MMQB last week. And you need Cam Newton in there if you're the Carolina Panthers to get that rhythm down with his guys as he's working on taking the layups, passing to the Christian McCaffreys and the Curtis Samuels on that roster, and adjusting to this new offense as the Panthers evolve. So that part is concerning. Look, the Panthers knew they were taking a risk when they operated on the quarterback's throwing shoulder. They didn't want to do it. They ended up having to do it as late as possible, and that was the end of March. If hindsight being 2020, if they could go back in time, would they have done it the 1st of February? Potentially, but of course they didn't want to operate on his shoulder until they had to. And when they had to, now, of course, he's experiencing some severe pain, I'm told. What they especially want to do here during training camp is make sure that he doesn't fall back on his bad habits. They want to focus on the footwork. They want to focus on him standing erect in the pocket. And if he is throwing with a bad shoulder, he might fall back into those bad habits they've been trying for so many months to eradicate.
If there was any indication of what the 2016 season would have looked like for Cam Newton, you didn't have to look further than week 1 with those vicious hits that he took that carried out throughout the season and ended with the shoulder surgery that you talked about. 2017, they're talking about a new offensive identity, taking away some of that deep rhythm passing game and those quarterback runs. Talk about what you've seen thus far and what you've heard.
Well, first of all, I'm fairly concerned about who's going to stretch the field for the Panthers. It may be Curtis Samuel, the second-round pick out of Ohio State, but it's probably not going to be Kelvin Benjamin or Devin Funchess. These are two very big receivers. They're not getting down the field, 25 yards down the field really quickly. You have the tight end Greg Olsen. He has good pass catchers, but who's going to stretch the field like Ted Ginn Jr. did for the past 2 seasons? I'm not sure if they have figured that out just yet. Jonathan Stewart's healthy. Their run game should still be there. And you mentioned, of course, the hits that Cam took last year. That's in part why he was so heavy last year. Over 260, around 260 to 265 last year, so that he could absorb the hits that he was taking there in his 6th season. Well, now going into his 7th year, he's slimmed down dramatically. I think he checked into camp right at 246, which is the slimmest he's been since his Auburn days. And that would indicate that he's ready to evolve with this offense. That doesn't mean that he's going to stop running necessarily, but he and the Panthers are going to be more judicious with how and when he takes off.
Cam has a new weapon in that offense with the Swiss Army knife, Christian McCaffrey. How does he look right now in camp?
Well, he looks fantastic. And look, a lot has been made of his one-on-one drills against Luke Kuechly. Anyone who understands a modicum of football understands that one-on-one drills are designed for the running back or the offensive player to win against the defensive player. So you shouldn't read too much into that. But the Panthers are absolutely moving Christian McCaffrey around from the backfield to the slot to split out wide. They are going to use him very similar to how Stanford used him. However, they do have different personnel. They have some big tight ends. So things are going to be different. But one thing that Panthers coach Ron Rivera and a lot of the offensive staff members have told me and repeated time and again, this is not going to take away from Jonathan Stewart's snaps. He's still going to touch the ball 18 to 20 times a game. They're just going to find ways to work McCaffrey in as a rookie and being as explosive as he is.
Switching over to the Falcons, does the specter of the Super Bowl loss still hang over the team? Does it go unspoken? What's the vibe like at camp?
The Falcons really approached it back in the spring and in the early summer workouts, OTAs and minicamp. They talked about it. I don't know if they were necessarily happy to talk about it, but they did discuss it. Dan Quinn was able to get his players to understand what went wrong. And look, Dan Quinn is all about mottos. He's all about sayings. He's about T-shirts. In fact, later on tonight during Falcons practice, he's going to have a new T-shirt for his Falcons players. He wouldn't reveal to me what would be on the T-shirt yesterday when I asked, but he's all about that stuff and moving forward. These guys aren't talking about it anymore. Once training camp hit, they were moved on to 2017. Does it still linger in their minds? Do they still think about what could have been if Julian Edelman doesn't make that catch, if they run the ball rather than have a pass play? Of course they have to think about it. But in terms of speaking to it with the media, they're not really reliving that anymore.
When you look at the Atlanta Falcons from 2016, they led the NFL in scoring and really carried that defense. Now without Kyle Shanahan, him leaving for San Francisco, what changes have you seen in this offense?
They have said time and again that this is not going to be, and I spoke with Steve Sarkisian yesterday, one-on-one actually. They have said time and again, this is not Steve Sarkisian's offense. This is the Atlanta Falcons offense, that they like what they were able to do last year. Look, Kyle Shanahan brought this offense in there. In the first year, it was a rough go of it, and no one is making, no one's saying otherwise. But in that second year, he unlocked something in Matt Ryan. And what they were able to do, how Matt was able to spread that ball around. If you go back to 2015, a lot has been made of Julio Jones' red zone targets, that he wasn't being fed the ball down there when they got to the goal line. Well, in 2015, they had more red zone turnovers than any other team in the NFL. That was cut out in 2016. And you saw Matt Ryan and Kyle Shanahan both work to understand, look, there's Taylor Gabriel, there's Devontae Freeman, there's Tevin Coleman. Austin Hooper is emerging as a tight end, as a very good tight end for them. And so it doesn't always have to be fed to the guy that I consider to be the best receiver in football. As you move on to 2017, they're going to make some tweaks. I think you're going to see some different personnel groupings, is what Steve Sarkisian told me without revealing too much. But this offense, in an ideal world for the Atlanta Falcons, will look a lot like what it looked like last year.
Jonathan, thank you, man. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate the insight.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Who has the best football team going into 2017? Peter King, of course. The MMQB honcho picked the top positional groups from this year's teams to create a super team. Starting in the trenches is the Titans O-line. Tennessee has a group of Titans up front, with 2 first-rounder bookends at tackle. No Titans OL starter ranked below 27th on PFF's positional rankings, and 3 were top 10. Under center, we have the Patriots QBs. Brady is the best in the game after another crazy Super Bowl comeback, and Jimmy Garoppolo proved efficient when he stepped in for a suspended Brady last season. Tom Terrific will be handing off to the Vikings' strong running back group, featuring the electric do-everything rookie Dalvin Cook, and a solid rusher in Latavius Murray. On the flanks, King likes Miami's wide receiver group, with the speedy Kenny Stills taking the top off the defense for the workhorse Jarvis Landry and physical freak Devontae Parker. For tight ends, it's New England and Rob Gronkowski. The Pats unit lost Martellus Bennett to Green Bay, but picked up an underrated Dwayne Allen from the Colts. On the defensive side of the ball, Houston's front 7 will dominate, boasting a Defensive Player of the Year in J.J. Watt, a number 1 overall pick in Jadeveon Clowney, and having incredible position flexibility. Whitney won't be anything on the D that's merciless. Patrolling the skies is Seattle's Legion of Boom. Earl Thomas will have to bounce back from a broken leg, but Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor are still the best in the game. Add 3 rookies picked in the top 4 rounds, and it's time to lay the boom. On special teams, it's the Pats' mistake-free unit. Led by Pro Bowler Matthew Slater, the Pats are solid all the way through, from Stephen Gostkowski's kicking to Ryan Allen's punting. Prowling the sidelines is the hooded one. Bill Belichick and the Pats coaching staff are the hands-down choice. Do you need to ask their 5 Super Bowls why?
I'll start with the offensive line. That's my forte. I'll go there right away. Believe me, I understand Taylor Lewan, Jack Conklin, Ben Jones, that Tennessee Titans have had an unbelievable young offensive line grooming together. But for me, you still can't dethrone the Dallas Cowboys. Between Tyron Smith on the left tackle position, Travis Frederick at center, and Martin at the right guard position, who is the best guard in the NFL, he will be able to help La'el Collins, who's starting at right tackle for the first time. And with Leary getting out of there at that left guard position and Cooper coming in between Frederick and Smith, they will be able to have that same type of offensive line mesh.
For some reason, I trust your analysis of guard play on the offensive line more than mine. So I'll go to the skill position players. What about at wide receiver going with the Giants now that they've added Brandon Marshall, your old team? Odell Beckham, Brandon Marshall, Sterling Shepard seems like a pretty good trio to me.
Unbelievable trio, but once again, for that group, it's going to come down to being able to run the football so that they're not one-dimensional on offense. The next group that I have to look at, the running back group, I may have taken away from the Titans' offensive line, but I'm going to give it to their running backs. When they have DeMarco Murray and Travis Henry running behind those guys, that is a deadly combo, a deadly duo, and they're going to have an unbelievable year this season.
I think Le'Veon Bell might be the best running back group. He can run, he can catch.
Just him.
As long as he's on the field, Le'Veon Bell takes that for me.
And the last one that I would compliment, and I would say as much as you want to give it to the Legion of Boom, with Earl Thomas coming back from an injury, how could you not mention the New York Giants? You have to mention DRC and Janoris Jenkins on the outside with Eli Apple. You have Landon Collins and Darian Thompson coming back from injury. So they're going to be able to use Landon Collins at even a more effective way than they have in the past, because he is a better player when he's going down to the line of scrimmage and being able to be more aggressive. So I will tell you this, now that they're in the second year playing together, Coach Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator, is going to have some exotic stuff built up, just like that 07 team that we won the Super Bowl with.
We mentioned a couple of units from the Giants. Are they going to win the NFC East this year?
That's the biggest question. Everybody else in the East has bolstered their roster. If the 2 teams that I would pick that I think are going to be fighting at the end of the year for it, I think it's going to be between the Giants and the Eagles.
We'll see how it turns out. You didn't even mention the Cowboys. Uh-oh. We're going to be in trouble. They're third or below. Back to some on-the-field news. Texans receiver Will Fuller broke his collarbone and is out indefinitely, while Titans wideout Corey Davis will have an MRI on his hamstring. Either of these injuries stick out as particularly significant?
They both are when Tom Savage is your starting quarterback right now. And that's the biggest thing that they needed to stay at that position, the wide receiver position. They had to stay healthy to help out not only Tom Savage, but who I think Deshaun Watson, who is going to be the starter of this offense, he needs to have those weapons on the outside for him to be able to get the ball out of his hands quickly and be able to run the football. And for anything, for them to control the time of possession. When they have a great defense like they have with J.J. Watt coming back, they have to control the time of possession to keep this defense fresh. We know that Romeo Crennel is still on staff, and I will say this, Mike Vrabel was one of the most wanted coaches last year, not only in the college game, but in the NFL. He's going to do an unbelievable job as a D coordinator there.
Meanwhile, the Seahawks had a slobber knocker of a brawl at practice. When exactly does a training camp brawl cross the line? When does it go from skirmish to too far?
Yeah, it goes from skirmish to too far when you start getting cheap shots. People hitting people in the back, people getting
Poked in the eye.
Captain Insano shows no mercy.
Throw some dust up there.
That's the biggest thing, is that you know that there's going to be fights in camp. You know that you're going to be fighting, playing. There's heat. You're in full pads. You're smashing. But the biggest thing is, don't get anybody hurt for the season. Be smart. Make sure nobody gets rolled up on, because getting into a fight with camp, letting your emotions dictate things like this, that's what hurts your team. And the biggest thing is when a coach says stop, and when they tell you to stop, you need to stop, because if those lines get blurred, that's when you start seeing the 15-yard personal fouls and the penalties in the game that we all know loses games for teams and loses playoff games, like Vontaze Burfict in Cincinnati.
We mentioned it off of the top of the show, but Dave, we'd be remiss if we had you on the show and didn't touch on an ever-present topic in the football world, and that is the topic of head trauma and football and CTE and the evolving studies and everything that comes along with that. Now, as a former player who obviously made your livelihood there, how do you interpret it? Do you look back on your career differently, and how do you take these current studies?
You know what? I don't look back at my career any differently, because I knew what I was getting into. As a football player, you know it's a dangerous sport. Just like we remember James J. Braddock. You're trying to tell me boxing's dangerous? There's people building the skyscrapers in New York that are falling and dying too. So when it came to the sport, when it comes to football, you knew that it was dangerous. Is hearing that 10 of 11 former players had CTE very scary? Absolutely, because you feel for those families, you feel for all those affected, and you hope that they're working out with the NFL, the concussion settlement. It'll never bring anybody back, but because of all of that happening, it's completely changed football for everybody. You talk about equipment. From the NFL down, the same helmet that I wore in the pros, the should helmet, Pee-wees are wearing that same helmet. My shoulder pads X-Tech, Pee-wees are wearing that same helmet. You think about how they used to teach you how to tackle. Put your face in there. They used to tell you to hit with your face mask. Now it's completely different. From NFL down, now they're coaching rugby-style tackling. Bend almost like a gator roll. It's more effective. You're not getting your head into there. You're not hitting that way. So the game is completely changed because of this. And the last thing I'll say is once they look at other sports as well, think about soccer players like Neymar, who's been heading a soccer ball since he was 4, or hockey players who have been groomed in Canada since they were 4, getting checked and hit. Until those come out as well, you really don't have the full baseline for every sport that used to historically be the way that it was.
Can I counter that for just a second in soccer specifically? Because hockey, there is a lot of collisions.
Yeah.
But soccer, you're talking about headers and you're talking about concussions. And I think sometimes in this discussion, maybe because of the movie, concussion becomes the buzzword and people lose sight a little bit about all of the repeated collisions that seem to be, at least from my novice understanding, the root cause of CTE.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. But also, when it came to now, it's baseline testing. Back then, when you would get hit, you just got your bell rung, you have a little bit of a headache. There was none of the testing done. Unlike now, you think about a knee, an ankle, any of that type of stuff. That's something visually that you can see. Your brain, that's your brain rattling up against your skull. And you can't visually see that until you get the baseline testing, until you get the return to play protocol. And the other thing, as an athlete, and especially as an NFL player, I mean, this is guys' livelihood. This is all that they have in order to survive and survive for their families. So some of them have a warrior mentality that they would want to push through a concussion, thinking that if I don't play in this game, I may lose my job. The NFL has taken an independent evaluator that's in the box, on the sidelines, that takes it out of the organization's hands, takes it out of the players' hands, and said, you're going to the locker room, you're getting evaluated. All of those were needed in order to make the game safer.
So do you feel good about the state of the sport moving forward?
Granted, there are still things that need to be done. There are still steps that are going to continue to be done, but they're being proactive about it, and it's going about in a way that's going to help the youth. Like I said, you think about equipment, you think about coaching, you think about coaches being NFL player certified and NFL coach certified, so that you have youth learning how to play the game the right way.
David Diehl with his thoughts on concussion, CTE, and all of the ramifications throughout the football world. Finally, we said we'd get to it. Giants dancing. Eli Manning. Did you see that in the locker room when you were around?
You know what? A little bit. I think when he started to hear the music, I think if you hear it in the background, I think he was thinking that it was Casey and the Sunshine Band and it wasn't Trick Daddy coming in. But yeah, Eli has a little bit of it in it. And that's the thing that people don't see, is that Eli has that same type of locker room atmosphere. He plays jokes. He's funny. He's just like everybody else, but nobody outside of the locker room or outside of the field really see that side of him. So it's funny. I know right after it went out and he saw it, he's like, man, I got to go get Landon Collins. He's got to make sure that I'm warmed up a little bit better before he throws something like that up.
I was in an elevator with Eli once, and I was surprised by how funny he was in that quick encounter. So he is a very sharp and funny guy. We do have a little bit of breaking news right now. Charles Oakley reportedly accepted a plea deal this morning that, amongst other things, requires him to stay away from Madison Square Garden for 1 year, which could be taken as a reward, I guess, given the state of the Knicks. He was in court facing misdemeanor charges that stemmed from his incident at a Knicks game last spring. You're a Knicks fan. What did it feel like to see a team legend, regardless of the circumstances, taken out the way Charles Oakley was?
He had every right to say what he said. He's disappointed in the organization that he helped build to when they were good. So he had every right to say what he was saying. And I couldn't imagine somebody saying, well, hey, Michael, you said those things on the air. You're no longer back in Giant Stadium. That would never happen. You want your older players around, not only for the legacy of your team, but when you have older players come around that not only are still current players, but the older players that are historical, like Charles Oakley, it shows younger players that, if I work hard and I'm loyal, I could be a Knick forever. I could be a Giant forever. I can be a Steeler forever. And that weighs in the locker room. And that's one of the biggest things that you hear, and I heard from a lot of the former Jets players that I know, is that when you have Nick Mangold and David Harris, you take care of these players, because if you don't, the younger players aren't going to be loyal to the organization, because they're thinking, if you're going to release Nick Mangold and David Harris that way, why am I going to be loyal if they're not going to be taken care of?
Yeah, a lot of Knicks fans felt a certain way about it. And it shows you how tone-deaf the organization is, right? Because there's got to be a different way to handle it than putting him in handcuffs and taking him over to the precinct. As always on Friday, we have our Weekend Drive. It's time for SI Now's Weekend Drive, presented by Toyota. Let's go places. First, we head to Queens for the anticipated debut of the newest Dodger, Yu Darvish. With Clayton Kershaw sidelined due to a back injury, the team is looking to Darvish to maintain their steady momentum atop the NL standings. Here's Darvish's thoughts on playing for a contender.
それは僕はどう思うかというよりも、トレードって言われたら、もう行くしかないですし、それに対してちゃんとプロとして、ちゃんとアジャストできるようにするだけなので、ちゃんとチームに溶け込めるようにとしか今は考えています。
Darvish will look to right the ship against the Mets. In his last outing, the righty gave up 10 earned runs. Next, we cross the Atlantic for the Women's British Open. Michelle Wie shot a commanding 8 under in her opening round to put her atop the leaderboard. With Kings Barnes being a links course, Wie has had fun adjusting to the different approach to the course.
I do. I love it. I mean, I'm, putting with my, 11 wood, chipping with things I never would in the States, bumping runs, and it's fun.
Wie will look to continue her hot streak and secure her first win of the year. Lastly, we head back stateside for the New York Derby between NYCFC and the Red Bull. Last time these two teams met, FC beat their local rival for the first time in team history at Red Bull Arena. Manager Patrick Vieira has pinpointed defense as the focal point of their success.
Always talk about being solid defensively. It's not just about the back four or the central backs. It's about the team, because when you concede chances, that mean from up front we didn't work well or we didn't work hard enough.
FC is currently third in the conference standings, but with a loss, they will get jumped by who else? The Red Bull. And that's what's in store for the weekend. That's going to do it for us here on SI Now. Thanks to David Diehl for joining us. Great job, man.
Thank you. It was a blast.
Again, much larger than I am. Make sure you're back Monday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern and follow us at SI Now Live and on SI.com. Have a good weekend, everybody.